The world is divided into 4 spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Lines.
Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Michael Fox. Last month, we brought you an interview with Spanish communications professor Victor Sampedro about the future of journalism and the role that hackers are playing in the fight for justice, freedom, and accountability. Today, we bring you the second half of that interview. We'll be discussing how hacker activism has evolved from the early days of indie media, about the need for a new international Bill of Rights for the Internet, and about press coverage of the new leftist Podemos party in Spain. But first, we're going to look at the inconsistencies in a recent ruling from the Inter-American Human Rights Court that's called on Venezuela to reinstate the RCTV television channel. Here it is. What would happen if a news outlet in the United States openly backed a coup attempt that saw the president kidnapped, placed under arrest by dissenting military officers, and replaced by the country's leading business executive? Sounds like something out of Hollywood, right? Well, this is precisely what happened in Venezuela in 2002, when a coup attempt saw then-President Hugo Chavez briefly ousted from power. The role of the private media behind the coup is undeniable. Some coup supporters, such as Vice Admiral Victor Ramirez Perez, even boasted of the media's help during the short-lived coup, when he said, quote, "We had a deadly weapon, the media." RCTV was one of the channels that backed the 2002 coup. When its broadcast license came up for renewal in 2007, the Venezuelan government decided not to renew it after authorities found that the channel had failed to comply by the country's media law on a series of occasions, and that an outlet that supported a bloody coup attempt was no longer entitled to hold a license. Fast forward 8 years. This month, the Inter-American Human Rights Court published a ruling that found that Venezuela had, quote, violated freedom of expression when it decided not to renew the over-the-air broadcast license of RCTV. The court accused the government of denying the license in an effort to stifle dissenting voices. Yet in its sentence, the court admitted that there was a coup attempt in April 2002, that private media played an active role in that coup attempt, and that this media towed the line of the short-lived coup regime. In short, the court's decision is invariably a political one. In essence, it says that any media outlet should have unrestricted access to publicly regulated and owned airwaves to distribute any message it wants, even if that message is one that seeks to undermine democracy and the Constitution.
President Obama is a constitutional law expert.
The role of checking the power of big governments and powerful entities has traditionally been in the hands of muckraking journalists and independent media. But in recent years, it's fallen on the shoulders of hacker activists or hacktivists, such as Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and Edward Snowden. This check on powerful entities through media, hackers, or the internet is what Spanish communications professor Victor Sampedro calls the fourth power. Sampedro is the author of the recently released book, The Fourth Power Online, The Evolution of Hacker Activism and the Future of Journalism. Sampedro is professor of public opinion and political communication at the King Juan Carlos University in Madrid. He's the author of more than 10 books on media, communication, elections, and public opinion. This is the second half of a 2-part interview with Sampedro. Victor, you've written about how the anti-globalization movement has given way to Occupy and the Arab Spring, and how indie media has really developed into hacker activism, or hacktivism as you call it. Can you explain this development and why this is so important for people to understand in the current media landscape?
When the Zapatistas movement in Mexico arrived in the mid-90s, in 1994, I mean, they built, precisely because of their use of internet, the first transnational movement, which is clearly related to the population's strife all over the world against the fight against neoliberal globalization, okay, and the search for new world, etc. And that's where the indie media arrived. The indie media are still focused and still follow the counter-informative strategy. We do mobilizations and we cover them. We help like we serve like an umbrella for the activists. So if we do the coverage, there won't be that much repression, and we denounce and we put into visibility that repression. That was if you think about that, it was extremely important. Also, the digital media are used to support the dialectics and the debates and of the social forum, and that's also a very important use. I mean, it's a very smart and intelligent use of the web, but especially in the media, it's still reactive. I mean, we do denounce repression, and we do counter information. We say we build the agenda, the counter agenda of the official agenda, but we are not still able of pushing our own agenda, and that is what happens. What comes with the hackers. The hackers are the responsibles. I mean, they are responsible for the building of the internet, or the internet as we knew internet before Snowden and the NSA scandal. They worked in the 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, to build the net as a space of resistance, of free tools to be used by populations to resist power, to resist illegitimate power, to do civil disobedience in favor of human rights. And I mean, that's the encryption tools that they provide with. And suddenly comes WikiLeaks, which is like a prototype, a radical, extreme prototype of all these ideas, okay?
Can you speak to the Marco Civil da Internet in Brazil? It's been called a Bill of Rights for the Internet, and you've said it's possibly a Magna Carta for global internet regulation. What is it, and why is it so important?
The Carta Magna of Internet is the first step of a national government together with the digital rights movements to push ahead an agenda of institutional design that guarantees digital rights, okay? We cannot do this by ourselves in our countries. We have to do this together. And it's clear that the ones who are being called to keep the banner going ahead are precisely the countries that we are talking about now, and for example, the one that I'm speaking from now, Ecuador. I mean, Latin America, that's my dream in political terms, in digital policy terms. Latin America could lead the global movement of for free software and free knowledge economies. The Ecuador has done tremendous steps in that direction, has taken tremendous steps in that direction with the Flock Society project. It's in theory, okay, but it's just such a conceptualization of a change of from cognitive capitalism to cognitive socialism, biosocialism is such a great endeavor, enterprise, ideological enterprise, and now we have to lead together with the progressive nations, with other progressive nations and regional areas, a fight against the this system of mass surveillance, where corporations and big powers work together, hand by hand, and leave populations naked, while the democratic thesis is that privacy for the ones who are governed for the ones who are weaker and transparency for the ones who govern, who have the power. We have to really to get our hands already in that enterprise and do our best in pushing this digital policy agenda. And yeah, Brazil took some steps, but one nation and one attempt is not enough. We have to do that in common, and many populations and many nations should be together in advancing this. Well, that's my hope and that's my call. And I thank you very much for allowing me to do this.
I want to close out with Spain. There, Podemos and a coalition of leftist parties made big gains in elections in May, and there's high hopes for this coalition in the national elections later this year. Talk about the role that the mainstream media has played in its coverage of Podemos and this new left in Spain.
Okay, what has happened in my country with conventional media and these new political actors is exactly what happened in this country, and also in Venezuela, and also in Bolivia, and also in Argentina, and also in Brazil. Conventional media are conservative in the true meaning of being conservative. They don't want to move from where they are, which is a position of dominance. Okay, mainstream conventional media are not, like, to come back to the beginning of our conversation, are not a counter power anymore. They are part of the power, and many times they are the main power sustaining the other ones. Imagine what could have happened if the economic and financial crisis in Europe would have been addressed by conventional media, just saying who was the real responsible for this, pointing out the companies and the big CEOs who were responsible for illegal practices, and instead of designing a strategy, a rhetorical strategy of blaming the populations and insufflating fear to them, imagine that they did the other narrative. I mean, it's so obvious that mainstream conventional media are conservative that it's as obvious as what they have done with Podemos. I mean, it's like they use them like conventional media did with the hackers. You use them because you get big audiences. I mean, TV rates of political talk shows in Spain had never been as big as when Pablo Iglesias and other Podemos leaders were there. And then after that, you destroy that hero, and you apply to them such an unequal protocol, because you treat them as if they were part of the, as if they were governing already, as if their little mistakes of rhetorics were as important as the ones with someone who has political responsibility, or small financial things which are not illegal are turned into a financial scandal, or everything exaggerated. Twitter from one leader of now in the city government of Madrid is taken out of context, and he's presented like a racist, it's outstanding. It's like a inequality, such a it's a treatment of using and then destroying. Okay, it's like is this horrendous game of building public figures and then eroding their legitimacy, and you earn money while people see how big they are becoming, and you also earn a lot of money seeing how down they can go.
Well, Victor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
Thank you to you, and I'm the honored.
And now we're going to take a quick look at how the press has reacted to the recent election of Jeremy Corbyn as the head of the British Labour Party. In an interview with US radio host David Barsamian from many years ago, Noam Chomsky said that, quote, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. This is a formula that's been successfully applied in most Western democracies, but every once in a while the world is forced to take notice of just how much the spectrum of debate is limited, and rarer still, something gives." The election of Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the British Labour Party represents one of these rare moments. Corbyn is a self-proclaimed socialist, a fierce critic of imperialist wars, and has been a key figure in fights against austerity and inequality in the UK. In short, Corbyn clearly falls outside what the political class and the mainstream media deem to be within the acceptable range of political opinions. The British press have had a field day with his election, but it would seem the US media are even more terrified at what Corbyn's victory represents. Just to name a few outlets, NBC News, ABC News, and Slate all ran stories about Corbyn's outsider status, framing him as, quote, "a Karl Marxist admirer" or divisive far leftist in their headlines. Corbyn represents very real sentiment amongst large segments of the population in the UK, and growing sentiment in the United States. The concerted attack on Corbyn is no accident, however. As the Washington Post noted, Corbyn's rise echoes that of another senior citizen socialist who has come out of nowhere this year to rattle his party's center-left establishment. Political and media elites in the United States are genuinely worried. Is a homegrown socialist president knocking on their door? And that's it for today's program. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Michael Fox. Please join me next week.